This is the Path of the Eagle, a detailed overview of my experience at Hobbs State Park. Firstly, I'm going to start with the path. Essentially, Hobbs State Park is in uh, the greater Rogers area on the outskirts of Rogers, Arkansas, right next to Beaver Lake. As you can see in this picture here, there's many rivers and creeks that branch off from Beaver Lake that go into the conservation area. The trail I walked uh, when I went was the War Eagle Valley Loop. Um, we started at the visitor center, and in an attempt to find the trail, it was kind of difficult. We started here, and my All Trails app tried to take us down this path, which we were unable to do. So we had to drive and go down this very long dirt road and start here instead. And from there we made a left and went all the way around and eventually ended up back at the start. So before I get into the rest of the presentation, it's important to know proper attire and safety. So there are some common mistakes people do when they go on a hike. Here's my friend Jaden for an example of what not to wear on a hike. You do not want to wear pants that have open uh, legs, essentially open at the bottom of your feet, because it allows ticks and bugs to crawl up inside. It is good, however, that he wore a thick, durable pair of pants. You don't want to wear low top and loose shoes because it allows bugs to crawl into your shoes and up your leg and to the rest of your body. It is also not advised to wear a shirt that doesn't cover much or is loose fitting because same thing, you can get a lot of bugs. Fortunately, Jaden got hundreds or probably like 100 ticks all over his body. Um, this is not something we were thinking of when we went hiking, and on a long hike like this in the woods, it is very important to wear proper attire, like what I was wearing. I was wearing hiking boots, which allow for better grip, better balance, better ankle support, and also better protection from animals. I was wearing pants that were a thick, good material, as well as cuffed at the bottom, which is important again for preventing ticks and bugs crawling up your legs. My shirt wasn't exactly much better than his, except for the fact that it was tighter fitting and cuffed around my arms. Now I had it rolled up a lot of the time because of how hot it was, but because it was not as open, it prevented as much, uh, as many ticks. Now, it is important to make sure you bring a lot of water with you. We did not bring enough, and fortunately, it wasn't an extremely long hike where it would have put us in danger. It is good to bring a flashlight, a headlamp, or something we brought in case you get stuck out there and it gets dark. It's good to bring bug spray of some kind to ward off bugs. We may not have had the problem we had with Jaden if we had some bug spray. It's just important to be mindful when you go out. You are going into the wilderness and it is and can be dangerous. Now, let's talk about ticks. Ticks can often be misidentified as other bugs, insects, lots of times spiders. It's important to know what you're looking at when you're looking at a tick. A tick will have a very, very small head and a large body, disproportionately large to the rest of its anatomy, and all of its legs will be attached to it. It almost looks like a really weird crab. It's a very, very weird looking thing. It's important to know what you're looking at. Typically, they'll be brown. You can have some that have different markings, but essentially, if they have this kind of shape, you know what you're looking at. And it is important to deal with ticks as soon as possible. As soon as you get home, you got to check yourself. You can pull off tons of ticks, tons and tons of ticks that you wouldn't even know got on you because they secrete a special kind of saliva that numbs the area before they bite, so you're not going to know they're on you. So it takes a couple of days for any diseases they carry to set in. So if you get on top of it, you will be just fine. Okay, now let's talk about some of the things we saw. So in regards to vegetation, we're going to start with trees. There are many, many different kinds of trees in Arkansas. Some of the most common you'll see everywhere are oaks, pines, cedars, sycamore, maple, and walnut trees. Presented in these pictures is the Arkansas red post and willow oak trees. There's tons and tons of oak trees in Arkansas. But these are probably the more dominant type. The main pine tree you're going to see is the loblolly. Very prevalent in Arkansas all over. You're going to see red cedars, American sycamores, red maples, and walnut trees. Um, I personally have a lot of walnut trees in my yard when I was growing up. It is fun to throw the walnuts at each other. It's a very fun thing. But the most common tree, as you can see in the ones that pictured here, is gonna be the oak trees. You're gonna see that a lot. In the top middle, you can see the loblolly pine, and the rest presented here are oak trees. So, what's some other vegetation that we saw? Firstly, we saw wild berries. Right there are black and red raspberries. Now, these will grow in the wild in Arkansas. You will see them along fence lines and deep in the forest as well. They're actually safe to eat, so if you're stuck out there, grab a handful, but be careful because they have thorns that are very, very fine and will prick you. It pricked me, and it hurts surprisingly bad. Um, some wildflowers that you'll see are the butterfly weed presented in the top picture. In the bottom picture, I could not identify what that flower was, but it's a pink flower. Some other very prevalent wildflowers is the purple coneflower and the black-eyed Susan, both super common wildflowers that you'll see in Arkansas. The purple coneflower has a black center with purple petals, and the black-eyed Susan is almost looks like a mini sunflower with more distance petals around it. And then right here is the daughter. It is a parasitic vine, and it will start growing on its own and try to find a suitable host. If it can't, then it will die very quickly. But it needs to tap into the host root system to get nutrients because it cannot photosynthesize very well on its own, which is apparent by its orange color. It is the orange and yellow vine that's wrapping around that vegetation there. That indicates it does not have a lot of chlorophyll, which means it does not have a lot of photosynthetic capabilities. It dies in the winter, and the seeds will just regrow. They don't really go away. They will get mixed in with agricultural crop as well, which is very hard to separate it from, and will in turn decrease the yields of the crops. And actually, another less harmful vine is the grapevine. Now, there are 7 species of wild grapes in Arkansas. 4 of them are edible: the summer, river, winter, and fox grape. But there are also many that look very similar, which are not edible. One of these is the moonseed. So be very careful when you're in the woods and you see something that looks like a berry or looks like a grape because it may not be edible and may not, and it may poison you, and you could end up dying or vomiting, having diarrhea, lots of very severe things. A very common thing that's eaten from the wild that people forage for is fungi. In Arkansas, there are tons and tons of fungi. Many are edible, many are not edible, and will severely poison you. And it's the same concept as like the grapes and the berries. The non-edible ones imitate or look like the edible ones. Right here a southern California uh, is a southern California snail, and next to it is a mushroom. I believe it's a honey mushroom. It was very damaged and beat up. Probably pieces of it have been broken off. So as a result, I think it's the honey mushroom, which is an edible mushroom. But like I said before, there's lots of mushrooms that look like other mushrooms, so it could very well be a poisonous mushroom. Right here is a turkey tail mushroom that's growing on the side of a fallen log. That one is also edible. Here is a ton of violet tooth polypore, which is growing all up that tree, which is very, very cool. It is inedible and extremely poisonous. And right here is the old man of the woods, which is another type of mushroom. It's a very unique looking mushroom. They don't, from what we've seen, what we saw on our hike, they grow individually and not like the turkey tail or the polypore. And it's a very unique looking mushroom. I wish I got a picture of the top, but the top is like porous. It's a black mushroom. It just looks super cool. It is actually edible as well. But like I said, be cautious about foraging in the woods because you can find berries, grapes, and fungi that are all edible, but they can also not be edible. Now to the critters that we saw while we were on our hike. So we saw three different snails. The first two is the Asian tramp snail, which is actually an invasive species, which I did not know. It takes up habitat of other snails. It pushes other decomposers out in competition for food, and they reproduce a lot and just are not great for the ecosystem. And right next to those two is a native snail, which is the Southern California shoulderband snail. Um, you can see the difference in the shell and the markings on the actual body of the snail. I like this one a lot more. I think it's very unique looking, very cool looking. This one was right next to that mushroom earlier. Now, we walked through tons and tons of spider webs all over the forest. They build them through the path, they build them around trees, they build them on the floor, they build them wherever they can. Um, they also have this somewhat defense mechanism that we witnessed a lot where you won't see the web, but you'll walk right through it, and immediately they drop straight down to the forest floor and escape, which is super cool. I just thought it was a super cool thing that we got to witness. But we walked through so many webs, and I don't mind spiders as much as Jaden does, but they still got me freaking out. Now, the most common spider we probably saw was the ground crab spider. It's actually called the deadly ground crab spider, but it is actually not deadly. Um, it's a very misleading name for people, but it's very deadly to small insects. And right here is pictured a white crab spider. I had a hard time identifying this. It started crawling on me, and it was very, very tiny. I just thought its markings were very unique. Initially, it was thought to be a tick, but as you can see, if we compare that to the anatomy of a tick we saw earlier, it has two very distinct uh, parts of its body, versus the tick has one dominant part of its body and one very, very small front section. And the legs on this is on the front and not on the abdomen, where the tick has the legs on the abdomen. And we saw this beautiful, beautiful caterpillar. Let's just take a good look at that. I love the colors on this thing. Its little spikes seem to warn off predators, and it was just chowing down on this leaf. It was beautiful. And come to find out, this is actually the caterpillar of the largest moth in North America, which I would have loved to have seen this moth. believe I've seen it a few times as a kid, but it would have been so cool to see it in person here. But that is the Cecropia moth. I don't know if I'm saying that particularly correctly, but it is very, very cool. And it's not even the largest just in Arkansas, it's across North America. It is the largest. I think we're super lucky to have been able to see that giant freaking caterpillar. It was so cool. And then other critters we saw, this trigger warning here. It's a little nasty, but I thought it was super, super cool. We actually saw this decomposing frog, which was super cool. And as I flipped it over, you saw tons and tons of these little beetles just scattering all about. They were chowing down on this frog, and they were obviously part of the decomposers of this group of the ecosystem, and they are called, let me find the name, the carrion beetles. And they are decomposers. Obviously, they were eating the decomposing flesh of this frog, and they're very, very crucial to the ecosystem, even though they might be a little bit nasty. But those are the natural things that we saw in the park, from the critters to the vegetation. Really would have loved to have seen more animals, but we went during the day, and most animals are pretty scared of trails. We did see a bunch of white deer, or a couple uh, does, white-tailed deer. We saw a couple does. Um, they had this really loud warning call, and all we could really see is the tail fling up and them just pounce away. So really cool to be able to like be in that. We saw a couple and just heard those loud warning calls. It was super cool. That's the extent of really what we saw while we were out here. Just a bunch of bugs, bunch of critters. We got eaten up by mosquitoes, saw a ton of gnats, all the little nasty bugs, but I thought these were the coolest ones that I was able to get a picture of. So now, there is like a very significant Native American history in this area. Right here is pictured very unique trees. And to the untrained eye, it may just look like just weird, like growth of trees, right? But this is intentionally done and was intentionally done a couple hundred years ago by Native Americans that lived in this area, which was predominantly the Osage and the Caddo and sometimes the Quapaw, mostly the Osage, then the Caddo, and then not as much the Quapaw. But they used to do this to mark trails, and they are a very important part of this area. As all land in the United States is a Native American land, as we all know, and in Arkansas there is lots of Native American, lots of reminders of these Native Americans. Like, for example, these trail markers that they created using trees with a technique that's similar to a bonsai tree, but on a larger scale. At other state parks like Petit Jean, you can see cave paintings. In various towns, you can find arrowheads just in the ground. Like, there's a very, very active Native American population in this area, in Arkansas in general. Um, but sadly, also there was also a very large. Uh, Arkansas played a very large part in the Trail of Tears, which more in Arkansas was more centered around the Cherokee. The Trail of Tears went through Arkansas and through major cities like Harrison, Fort Smith, Van Buren, Little Rock, and just all across from the east to the west of the state, somewhat like this. They just went all the way across the state and ran through a ton of cities through that area. Um, Things like this also drove out the Osage and the Caddo that dominated this area. The Osage was driven towards northern and western towards Missouri and Oklahoma. The Caddo were also driven to Oklahoma and Texas. And then the namesake of the trail we were on, the War Eagle Trail, and many areas in this, or many places in this area, comes from Chief War Eagle, who was actually born in modern day Minnesota, and he left his tribe, which was the Santee Sioux. I may be saying that wrong. He had a falling out, and it was said that it might have been like combat, like a bloody falling out. And after this, he actually allied with the American government, and he became a messenger and relocated to Mississippi and like the southern states, where he did a lot of work for the American government, opened a post office, and then eventually he married into the Yankton Sioux tribe, could also be saying that wrong, and he was even elected as a chief for that tribe, which is why he is Chief War Eagle. And there's been many monuments made of him. He's pretty notorious, a very notorious Native American individual. From what I've seen in my research, people have very mixed opinions of him, some viewing him as a great representation of Native American culture and just an advocate for Native Americans, but also some seem to view him as somewhat of a sellout. He was actually awarded the Silver Peace Medal by President Martin Van Buren for his work as a messenger and work for the government. So he did meet the president. He was an important American figure for a long time, but he also may have misrepresented Native American individuals. And I believe that in this area, things that have his namesake maybe should be given more towards the Osage or the Caddo or the Quapaw, actual indigenous natives to this area. My final thoughts on the park: I thought it was beautiful. I am blessed to have been able to go with Jaden, one of my best friends, even though he may not have been best prepared for it. There's a lot of beauty in this place. It's very well taken care of. You can notice there's a different level of care provided to these state parks than some of these local parks. Um, I am working to complete my Arkansas State Park passport. This is my sixth state park, and at 5 state parks you get a special sticker, which is presented on the right, and um, it says Club 52, which there's 52 state parks, and I love their motto. And you gotta get out to get in, you know. And I think this was definitely one of my favorites. There's more to explore. I definitely need to get back.